first of all, thank you for taking time.
Oh, this is great. Yeah.
So, yes, the project, to answer your question, it's been very slow, but a lot of the Russell guys have been coming out of the woodwork when they started hearing about it.
Oh, cool.
And Bob Earl and I go back quite a ways.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
sure you know Bob.
Another guy I haven't seen for decades, but he was a part of my childhood growing up. So good guy.
Yeah. And Bob has helped me quite a bit.
He's still up north somewhere.
He's
I
up in
presume?
McKinleyville.
Okay.
Yeah, he's way up there by
Oh
Eureka.
yeah, that's up by the Oregon, isn't it?
Yeah.
Somewhere? Okay.
Yeah, he's up there.
Yeah.
And so Bob's been helpful. And then Bob Butte, who was he was basically the first Russell mechanic ever.
Riverside, maybe then.
No, Canada.
Oh, Mont Tremblant.
Yeah, way back.
The stroll stomping grounds.
I was talking to the current crew chief at the time, and I said, hey, you know, has this ever really been a school? He says, well, we used to get Carroll Smith to come and talk once in a while when we were at Laguna.
Oh, cool. Okay. I
So
kind
I
of
went-
remember that. Yeah.
I went over to the office and I asked Shell Coleman, hey, did this really happen? He goes, oh, yeah, here, call it. So that's how I got connected with your dad.
My dad and Jock were always close, with the Skip Brown thing too in there. So they were very connected. And Jock, was always good. He let me do a free driving school when I was a kid. That's, kicked off a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely some good memories, and great guy, and him and my dad.
Yeah, obviously. So your dad came up and I said, look, I'm supposed to make a formal curriculum. Now you've written all these books.
Yeah.
And everybody tells me this is how you do this car racing.
Yeah.
So he said, oh, well, that's weird. Okay. Well, I'm going to go talk to the kids and afterwards we'll go have lunch. And he did his lecture. He used to do these half day kind of things. We had lunch and we went through the whole curriculum and he fixed a few things. And he said, let's do it. So he actually helped me set up the curriculum.
Fantastic.
To formalize it,
Yeah.
to present it to the state of California,
Huh.
who then wholeheartedly blessed it.
Made it a
Private post-secondary school.
my God.
So you couldn't issue college credits, but we
Right.
were legit.
That's awesome. And you were. I mean, a lot of those guys went on, as you're doing the documentary about it, went on to big things. So, and that was their launching pad. So, that's good to hear about my dad. I always, now when I run into people like yourself with the history, I realize the ripples in the pond from my dad, like little things that to him were a half a day hanging out with his friends and having lunch, that affected so many people over so many years. And, that's very cool.
Well, yeah.
Very
And
cool to hear.
it inspired me to keep going with the program. So I would constantly improve it as much as I could. And I think the
So
last
this was
time-
90s, you said, like
this was like
97.
2000,
Oh, okay.
90 and 2000, or 99 and 2000.
Yeah.
And then the last time I saw him in person, we were at the Formula SAE judging for the engineer kids
Oh, yeah.
in Michigan. And we got to talking about it. And he just kept saying, just keep going. You're doing it right. And we were doing a new brochure. The guys who did Got Milk actually did our brochures for
Oh,
Russell
cool.
in exchange for
They
seat
knew what
time.
they were doing. Back to the barter system.
Back
Well,
to
we
the barter.
won't talk to the IRS. about
God's
that.
Rich Silverstein said, look, we got to do something for your mechanic school. Give me some quotes from people. I called your dad
Yeah.
and said, hey, can you say something? And he says, yeah.
Mm.
And he wrote it very simply. He said, the very best mechanics I've ever worked with are graduates at Jim Russell School. Well, that brings me to tears almost.
Yeah,
because
that's moving.
that is a huge endorsement of what we were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and what you set up and
Well,
streamlined.
what he and I
and-
set up, and to be, anointed with that, to be blessed with this opportunity to take it forward.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Cameron, also had some quotes and stuff. And so he would employ a lot of the guys after the class.
Okay.
So I had a lot of help. It had pretty much nothing to do with me. I just
That
did the
Sears
table.
Point thing back in the day was amazing. The amount of talent and depth in the cars, and it was just that whole, probably still is. But I'm not involved anymore. When I think of how many prep shops and importers and part shops, and a lot of those driving instructors went on to have big careers, and guys like yourself, just an incredible talent pool in the walls of the, random semi-rural spot. So
Anyway, so that's how we got here. We got to this point, and over the years, Jacques sold out with his partner Ron at the time. They sold out
when was that? That was to
2000. 03
Oh, okay. So it's
or
been
4
years. Yeah.
to, God, it was Bell Motorsports.
Oh,
So
that's
the
right.
helmet guys.
Yeah.
So the helmet guys came up, they bought it out. They wanted to clean it up and basically, like all venture capitalists, flip it, which is, what they do. And we did a pretty good job. And then they sold it to the Speedway.
Okay.
So Sears Point or
They
Speedway
Infineon or
Motorsports.
whatever. Okay.
Yeah, Infineon was the sponsor, but
Yeah.
Speedway Motorsports, Barber and Smith Group, owned it for a while,
Oh, okay.
which was great. They would just
They had
kind of
the
said,
funding to do the cars and
well, they said, here, you guys do this. We don't know what you do. Let us know if you need anything. So we just did what we did,
yeah.
which was, you turn us loose so we can do
But
it.
you probably had a little more funding and depth and opportunity.
Yeah, and it
And they're
was,
corporate. They probably, I'm assuming it got a little more corporate too.
yeah, and
over
it
the-
helped to build a bigger, I don't know, user base. All the Bell people would come through,
Yeah.
so it helped solidify the sponsorship of Bell
know,
and these others.
I think Tom and Bart Kendall's dad, Chuck Kendall, used to own Bell helmets. I wonder if he was involved in
I
that.
think so. That name
Yeah.
sounds familiar. I sat in one board meeting, but it's
Yeah,
been a long
Yeah,
time.
he was a money guy, and I know owned Bell in the '90s. So I wonder, being a racing guy, if that fostered everything. But yeah. Great business model, though. I mean, just everything we're talking about, the speed and spa nature, and it's such a destination now.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
I get it.
And then they sold out to a venture capitalist group from England who promptly came in and told us we weren't doing anything right. We were going to get rid of this barn, build a new building and a fleet of cars. And they brought over a bunch of Lola F3 chassis and we assembled those. And they spent money really fast and didn't make money really
That's
fast.
a huge capital expenditure, the building and the cars. I mean, that's up into the probably tens of millions. So return on that.
Well, and you were a driver.
Yeah.
You went to school. What happens when you crash a carbon fiber Formula 3 car?
Lord. Yeah, that's a big bill for somebody.
You don't write a $180 check for a wing.
Isn't that? It isn't an aluminum wing and a A-arm that they're going to, oh my God.
We're going to recycle for beer money later. Yeah. So it blew up and I had to move on to other things and finally ended up at Honda. But this whole project came together specifically because I went and saw that movie, and I've told you this story, Ford versus Ferrari. And I watched it in the theater. It was right after kind of the pandemic. We were down here in Manhattan Beach.
Oh, it was a great movie.
Yeah. And we got one of those fancy theaters, with the seats that are comfortable, and watch the movie. The sound was incredible. Well, I could see two guys named Carroll would confuse people. All right. Well, I'm sure it'll be in the credits. It wasn't in the credits either.
Yeah.
And it was my wife, my mother-in-law, sweetest lady. She said, "Why do you look so angry?" I said, "Because they didn't mention Carroll." She says,
we got a lot of feedback on that at the time. And the book, the Ford Ferrari book was amazing. My dad featured in that prominently. And I do kind of have the story. I went to a Shelby reunion at the Peterson and saw great people I hadn't seen in years. Peter Miles, Ken's son, Pat Shelby's son, Aaron Shelby, connected with a lot of people. Really a fun day. And one of the few surviving Shelby employees from that day, very few, and maybe the only one, was a consultant on the movie. And he and my dad had really bad blood.
Oh.
And when I went up and said hi to him, I felt it right away. He threw some shade on my dad before I even shook his hand and got very flustered and kind of walked away. And he was the living consultant on that movie from back in the day.
That explains it.
It does.
Oh.
And you can edit this or not. It was
okay.
A little guy who featured in the movie. And I mean 50 some years. And I don't, this isn't fact, this is supposition, but pretty clear on my part. And there were people did mention too, two Carrolls with two hats might have been a little bit of a whatever. But, there's so many books on that era that really, fostered that movie. It's some beautiful stuff. I have probably half a dozen sitting here in the office, and my dad's clearly in all of them as a key player. And so we have that, and he had his memories. And if he'd been around, I'm sure he would have been a consultant and had at least a little cameo or something. So anyway, but a great movie nonetheless. Absolutely.
Absolutely. In fact, I haven't seen a lot of racing movies that were any better.
No, there's been so few. I loved Grand Prix in the day with, what's his name? James Garner
Jim Garner.
was good, and Le Mans
Yeah.
was good. Not a lot of dialogue. Rush I thought was good, and I kind of ran out. There's
Yeah.
been some really bad ones, and you got the Brad Pitt one coming out eventually, and I don't know. The guy's 62 and he's making a Formula One comeback.
Yeah.
It sounds
Well,
a little suspicious, but we'll see. I'll keep an open mind.
And Driven, that was the other one with
Oh,
Sylvester
Lord.
Stallone. I wanted to walk out.
He turned around on the track and drove counter course to go help his friend. I'm thinking, wait a minute, if you're halfway around a lap, what be faster? It was just, it was cartoonish.
It was really bad.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So that movie kind of fired you up about.
It pissed me off.
Yeah.
I'll just say it,
Yeah,
because that is horribly disrespectful. And so the whole point of this whole gathering stories, and you have some of the stories and some of the information. And so the film mentor I mentioned, Walt, said, look, you have got to start with the old guys first.
Just numerically.
And he said, look, you got to start with the old guys. Where's this Carroll guy? I said, well, Carroll passed away. He said, well, you screwed up already. Now go get the next guy. I said, well, it's Jacques.
Yeah.
Gotta be, right? So I found Jacques, and he still works.
And he's a key guy. He's a key part. I mean, that's probably the pinnacle of the whatever.
Yeah,
How old of a guy is Jacques now? I'm
85.
My dad would be 92 if he were alive. He was he'd be turning 92 in April, and I have to think about that. So, yeah, but lots of 92-year-olds walking around. I got a bunch of neighbors that age, and
Oh, yeah.
so.
Yeah, I got relatives that made it to 108. So
Oh,
I hear you. I mean,
Lord.
I started with Carroll. Oops, he's gone.
Yeah,
I start with Jacques.
right.
Jacques is, of course, he's easy to get to because he's right in Sonoma, and we live in Walnut Creek, so we can just drive right up there and sit him down. But it's taken the coronavirus, and then he's off fishing in Alaska for months at a time.
Okay.
Then he comes back and he works in his auto restoration shop.
Oh, so that's what he's fantastic. So he's doing like vintage restorations.
No, like the latest project is a Jaguar Mark II that they're making an electric, but with the gearbox.
Oh,
He's got a Cadillac. This
Uh-huh.
Cadillac is as big as this building,
yeah.
and he's just finishing that up.
So he's got some guys.
Oh, it's him and one other guy who's right around 90.
Yeah, right. Physical work.
He's doing the late. I called him the other
God
day, and he
bless
says,
him.
"Hang on, I got to put this head cover on, or valve cover."
That's good to hear. Yeah.
Absolutely bulletproof. And so now I'm gathering up kind of the next generation. Obviously, you're a connection to the purpose of this whole story. Now, you were never really a mechanic other than you and your dad working on your stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up around it. Would do stuff with him. I'm mechanical, but not a mechanic. And in karting and Formula Ford, I did most to all of my own stuff. But as you move up and it gets more complicated, and there's people that are better than that, and of course, I drifted away. And
Right.
I can still fix a lawnmower or something, but I'm definitely not anywhere near the level of the guys that really committed to it, and tons of respect. I started in karting like everybody, and my dad wasn't involved. He really wasn't until I started doing well, and then Skip Brown, who we talked about, a connection of Jacques, and he built the Swift chassis, sponsored me, and a local family that owned Earl's Performance, the plumbing.
Yeah. Bob and Bill
Stepped
Fouts.
up. Yeah, Bob. Yes, right.
Yeah.
So again, a small world, helped me get up into Formula Ford. No family money to spend on that. My dad worked for passion, not for money. Racing was not generally lucrative for my dad. My mom was a teacher. So yeah, with that and others came on board, I worked up through Formula Ford, did well, and then Super V, Formula Atlantic, did some stuff in Europe and Formula 3 briefly. I was Formula Atlantic champion in 92. Got some opportunities for testing in IndyCar and IMSA with Dan Gurney with the, Toyota program, and did some sports car stuff, Daytona, Sebring, different teams, was teammates with Bob Roll and a Spice at Daytona. We were on the pole and led until an engine blew up. And then, for me, I really made a hard stop. I got to be careful about throwing shade about people who stayed in it. But I was doing real estate by then. I'm a contractor, real estate broker at the time, doing some development, and very hard to do both. And most of the drivers that stayed doing coaching and ride and drives and whatever, it isn't a really lucrative, you're on the road all the time, and most of them struggle. And I went hard into real estate, started a development company and a lot of investment over the years. And it's been great for me. So that's been 30 years doing that. And I still do for the last 30 years, including starting next week again in Texas, about 50 track days a year for Yokohama Tire. I do all their US performance development. So I've been lucky. I kind of kept a hand in the driving. I really enjoy it. So, 90% of what I do is real estate and development and investment. And on the side, I've kept this going with Yokohama, for all these years. And I love it. It's probably winding down. I think they're growing to the point where they probably need a full-time guy. And I'm also 57 years old, and they know I'm not the future for them.
I know. Yeah.
They're looking for a guy now. We talk about it, and there's some candidates that, that I would work with as they come in, and they're looking for a guy to do the next 30 years. I've done 30 years. So that part of my life is kind of winding down in the next year or two. But yeah, and I'm still a huge race fan. I follow it all. I watched the IndyCar race today. Watched the Indy Lights race, watched the Formula One race yesterday, probably like most of us, especially Formula One. Huge fan.
Yeah.
Just love it.
I'm actually going to get to go with my friend Chris again. We're going to go to Montreal. He's always wanted to go to the Grand Prix Montreal.
Yeah.
He's Canadian, so it's in his blood. And I've never been.
My favorite track probably ever. I just loved that track. I won the Atlantic race with Formula One in 92 there. And as part of that, that paddock club, they had me go and I got to meet everybody, and it was like king for a day. Although no one liked me because they loved all the Canadians, Jacques Villeneuve was racing there.
Yeah.
The son and a bunch of others. Stefan Prue, a guy named Stefan Prue, who was a Jacques Couture, I think, protege, who died later. But all the Canadians, the fact that I beat him, I wasn't super popular, but yeah, that was special to me. I have such a affinity for Formula One, and to get to be part of it for a day was neat.
That is amazing. So Yokohama, they were good to us all those years too at the school.
Were they? When I first started doing stuff for them, they sent a bunch of their guys through the school.
Yeah.
And I know that was a good program for them too. They got a lot of corporate involvement, and they'd send guys through, and just the name recognition was awesome. So more ripples in the stream. Absolutely. Here,
it's all around Jim. I mean, that's the weirdest thing. And really, Jacques.
Yeah.
So you and Bob Earl were teammates.
Briefly. Yeah. That was a team called Bricks. I don't know if
he's mentioned it.
Yeah. And I went to Daytona, and, we did well. We were beating factory Honda Parker Johnson, and then we out-qualified them and were well ahead, and the engine blew up, and I was a young guy, and I think I maybe got a little bit of the blame. I was a younger Atlantic guy, and maybe they thought I was a little aggressive with downshifts and whatever. I don't know. And then they replaced me with a Canadian sports car, veteran who got horribly hurt like 6 months later with Fabrizio Barbosa. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that was in the car that I would have been in, so it was kind of poignant. That was Bob's teammate. And Jeremy Dale, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ended his career and Fabrizio Barbosa was at Road Atlanta. So that was like within a month or something of that, I think. But yeah. Anyway, Bob was great. It was fun to get to drive with him. I grew up watching him race, and, such an experienced, talented guy. And yeah.
Yeah, he's another one of the
neat deal
guys who turned his own wrenches as long as he had to and managed to put it together.
I know he was involved at Sears Point there. He had a building, and they were doing like importing parts or something. I mean, I know he always had a hand in the racing business, even apart from driving. And
well, it's funny because Carroll, when I was talking to your dad, I said, who else do you know that could come and talk to the students? Because all I wanted to do was to make sure they heard as much about the real world as possible before they went out there. Because, you're 18, you're living in Massachusetts, and you want to go to this school in California. So you're already fired up. And, I don't want to go to college, and I don't do good in classrooms, but boy, I love turning wrenches and racing, and you get to drive the cars, right? So I said, how can we continue to serve these guys? So, you got to get a hold of Bob. So we got a hold of Bob, and Bob being, at that time, he was just 15 minutes from the track.
Oh, wow.
So he could come over and do sessions. And then eventually he and I together just kept working on the program. They hired him on full time. So we
Okay.
we shared an office
Oh,
with the
cool.
cat and worked quite a bit side by side to get the kids ready for the real world.
Well, and I don't know that there's ever been a more experienced or dedicated, driving instructor than Bob. I mean, he's like the go-to guy that you would think of. I mean, incredible depth. I mean, so for all those guys learning to drive too, he had to just be the mecca for them.
And he still coaches a bit in
Does he?
vintage. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
He's only in his 70s, so he's a kid.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how old. When I was a kid and the guys were driving, they seemed so much older. But now that I'm older, we've
Yeah.
converged a bit, and it's funny. Like guys that were 10 years older now, I feel like we're all in the same boat. We're all old guys. So
Yeah. Well, that's how Jacques speaks even now. It's just like
yeah,
it was yesterday.
yeah.
You know?
Oh, crazy how fast it.
So you've got nice things to say about mechanics, I
Yeah.
imagine, in general.
Oh my God.
You got any good team story that you can remember right off the top of your
So
head?
many.
With
I
zero
don't
warning?
without prompting. I don't know. I will say that a lot of the racing I did was just on a wing and a prayer. I think we were famous for that. We'd have someone who bought a car, and me and my dad would prep it, and we had a lot of mechanics that maybe wanted to learn from my dad that would just tag along, and we'd give them lunch money and share a hotel, and just a wing and a prayer, and just some great guys, some of whom went on to do much bigger things, and so grateful to all those guys. And yeah, but the key thing is, like, back to your program, that so many of those guys, that was kind of entry level launching pad for them, and a lot of them went on to have and still have really good careers. So I guess they weren't crazy doing all that for a sandwich and a
Yeah.
place to sleep.
Place to
That was school for them. That was a master's degree in something, and just a great dedicated group of guys in general, to keep those hours and pull the all-nighters and drive a trailer across country and give up all the things, the comforts that the rest of us pursue. Just a very like-minded group of people that just wanted to see the car go fast and learn their trade and their craft and establish themselves. And my dad was so good with that, with the kids. A lot of the guys I work with at Yokohama, the majority came through Formula SAE. They're all engineers. They're all degreed engineers, some of them masters and a couple even with PhDs. And they all gave their lifeblood to Formula SAE. They talk about pulling all-nighters and not going to frat parties and, TIG welding stuff at 4 a.m. and then studying for a physics class. And my dad was part of that. They all know my dad. Like, no one even knew that he was my dad, and it would come up over lunch and they would just freak out because they all had the books and they were all immersed in it. And you mentioned you and my dad, Formula SAE judging.
Yeah.
They all remember him from that. So that's been really fun. I realized again, the ripple effect of your program and guys like my dad and Bob, the young kids that they mentored and affected and inspired, have gone on to probably filled 2/3 of the positions in motorsports today. The Formula SAE thing is amazing.
Yeah.
Such a powerful.
It's a huge feeder.
Driver.
I know when kids would come to me, sometimes they'd have an engineering degree, but they never changed their own oil.
Yeah, it's funny, right?
That some of these kids were
Ivory Tower,
well, blue bloods,
smart, yeah.
and on a path and decided to go racing and were supported by the families.
Yeah.
And they came in and they got their hands dirty. And because they also drove with Mark Walkichuk as the instructor, Jacques as the instructor.
Right.
Now you know how to drive, or at least you know what the driver's doing, and you know how to turn the wrench, and you know your engineering stuff.
Yeah.
So you're like this get.
Yeah, all around. Yeah.
I actually, up until 2 years ago when I left Honda, I was still working with former students because that's what they did.
Sure.
Yeah. Got to help her.
Settle her down a little.
She's great. But yeah, it's amazing. You're right, the ripple effect. I think that's a great way to put it.
Do you still have any involvement or connections with the school, or it just kind of turned over too many times?
It turned over and then finally went bankrupt. They sold out. Basically, the guys from England that I was telling you about that built the Formula 3s, they sold out to a guy who thought he was the next, like, Nissan story, where he was going to have everybody drive simulators. And then whoever won gets a free season in
Oh, right.
their
Like
cars.
that
Like
GT
that movie,
Academy.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
GT Academy
Mhm.
thing. And then everybody else, of course, would naturally pay to go drive. And what happened was one guy won the season and everybody else went, well, that was fun. See ya. Went back playing video games.
Yeah.
There's no revenue stream. It's not a good business model.
Yeah.
So he eventually BK'd completely. And the last I heard, they sold the last few running cars to customers.
So that school is there a school at?
Not in Sears
Oh, no
Point.
kidding.
Barber's been doing some, they sold out again.
And that went bankrupt. and
Barber
then
went
got
bankrupt. Yeah.
bought
It's
out.
like, what day is this, right?
Yeah.
They go round and round like all the schools.
Yeah.
But Barber went under, and then Barber got purchased basically in a pallet sale. It was online, like somebody sent me a link. Here, you
I
want to
think
buy
the
a school?
name would have been the
name is
going
all it's worth.
concern because that's the only Jim Russell would agree, but
No,
Skip Barber.
Barber's a household name.
It is.
Yeah.
That is a household name.
Barber's
That's
a
going
household
commodity. So
And Bondurant. Those are the two household names.
Bondurant. And
I-
now Bondurant is whatever they call it.
Performance driving school or something.
And Anstead and Jensen Button, whatever that car they're doing in England.
Yeah.
Ratcliffe?
Yeah, Radcliffe.
Ratcliffe, something.
Yeah.
That's, a buddy of mine, a close friend, a guy that raced for my dad as a teenager, a guy named Alan Berg. Do you know
Yeah.
Alan? No, I mean, Jock obviously must have been an amazing businessman. I see, Alan Berg, the school does pretty well, but it's very small, almost
Yep.
mom and pop level now. And they're branching out a little. They've added a couple tracks, but it's not on the scale that, Jock did. I mean,
No.
and maybe it will be at one point, but I didn't realize that the Sears Point, whatever the iterations of it was actually gone. And that's feeding Alan's because he has a lot of days at Laguna and he gets all the tech guys.
Yeah.
And he also does driver training for Waymo, which is big. So he's very tied in with that, tech field up there. And so, yeah, that must be feeding his school. Well, if the Infineon, whatever is.
They're called Sonoma again.
Sonoma. Okay. Are they? So
And they just finished repaving.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that it's not
That's a
being
lot of
torn
money.
out and made into condos. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which seems to happen a lot. But yeah, Skip Barber has some on track days.
Okay.
Come out for a week and drive a little bit.
Expensive now, I'll tell you that. I
Oh.
get emails from Alan and some others, and I click on the link just to see the cost of a 3-day school is like I buy used cars for less than that.
Really? How much?
Oh, can easily be 12-15 grand, for 3 days.
For a 3-day school?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
But the track rent is brutal. I'm not talking about Alan's pricing.
No, I mean,
Put that on the, but in general, that is the kind of money you're looking at for the advanced schools where you get a lot of track time and you got to add your travel and everything to that. So yeah, it's not for the faint of.
You know
what the track rent is at Laguna now? It's into the tens of thousands per day. I don't know if it's, no, this isn't from Alan, but in general, it's like 18, 20, 22 grand a day. Then they got to do their liability insurance. Then they got the cars and the, storage and the transport and the employee. You start doing the math, and I think what Jacques had was the volume, and the mechanics.
the free labor.
The free labor, which is big. So
And everything we owned was paid for.
Oh, yeah. A lot of man hours, huh?
But the kids learned so much.
Yeah, they were in heaven doing
And then
all
they
that.
drive.
That's great.
So
Incredible.
So every asset was paid for. I asked Jacques once, how come you're not a household name? Or Jim, why aren't you guys household names? Like I'm watching Seinfeld, he's got a Skip Barber.
Right. Everyone saw that because every episode it was on the fridge.
It's on the fridge.
And I guess he had gone to the school and they're like, that's crazy that you could not buy that. That's everybody knows. Unbelievable.
And
Yeah.
Jacques said, because, between Skip and Bob Bondurant, they knew how to do the whole sponsor thing. I'm not good at that.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. And he goes, and Jim just drove. That's all we do. We drive.
And they were both, big names from the day. Both had a Formula One history and everything. They were not household names like Mario Andretti or something, but they were, well recognized. Not that Jacques didn't have his history too, but
he couldn't sell himself to save his life. It's just like Earl. He's like, I'm Bob who?
yeah, be a commentator or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
He sure had the knowledge, but
but it wasn't his thing. So
what's Bob doing now? He said he does some instructing.
At least the last time I talked to him, it's been a couple of weeks, but he was still looking at doing the prehistorics down at Laguna and then the historics. he had some regular customers, but even they aged out. These guys who
Yeah.
would buy an Aston Martin
Right.
vintage car and then drive it, and he would help them out. But basically, he's semi-retired. He's
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of a caretaker of some properties for a friend of his.
Okay.
He's got a new girlfriend I haven't met yet, so I have to go up and approve her. And he does a lot of beach recycling and restoration up there. There's beaches along that whole Eureka coastline, that area,
Yeah.
and a lot of them been eroded or treated poorly by human beings, or garbage comes in. It's like
I've done that with my daughter's Girl Scout troop. We go to
beach cleanup day.
Venice and be like, oh, that's a drug deal. I'll have a condom. I'll get that. You got your glove.
Yeah, you got. We had
Venice was interesting. Venice.
Oh, yeah.
They needed to clean up, but it was like, okay, we saw some stuff there.
Yeah, no.
But good, good thing to do. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So Bob's doing that up there.
So Bob's
That's
doing
good
that
for
up
him.
there. He's restoring dunes, and he's just kind of living a really good life.
That's good to hear. Yeah.
So Bob's good. He's living kind of like the greatest retirement, if you ask me. So I was supposed to go up a couple weeks ago, and real life took over, as you know it does, and then snow. So I couldn't get up there.
Yeah. Oh man, they got hammered.
Yeah.
Oh, crazy.
You couldn't get
I
up
mean,
Shasta. So
Yeah. At least we'll get some runoff in the spring.
yeah, maybe, right?
But
If we could store it.
yeah,
But
that's good to hear. I'm so far out of racing. I have a few friends that are peripherally involved, and I'll hear more of the higher level stuff. I know some guys that do management of IndyCar, a couple of Formula One drivers get interesting stories, but doesn't relate to me or my life or the people that I knew. It's fun because I'm a fan, but really out of touch with what happened. A lot of the guys I raced with are instructors now, so many, which is great, but a hard way to living too.
well, yeah.
Not super lucrative and just a constant travel and but people do what they know and what they love, and that's racing. I mean, it still gets everybody's blood going, and
Yeah.
me too. I can't wait. I'm so happy. Like the season started now.
I know.
You
I
know.
know. And I was just looking at ticket prices for Long Beach, and I thought, God, I haven't paid for a race ticket.
Yeah, you
Really?
must have connections I would think where you could. I don't know if I would anymore.
I
don't think I would.
I'm just cheap. I mean, it's like $40 for Friday. The hell? Why would I do that?
Yeah, I wouldn't go. Alan's gonna come, and he had, they're going to the race. His son races now, and not at Long Beach, but they're just doing their thing. And honestly, as far as the racing, because I am a fan, but you see so much more on TV and all the stats and just amazing now with all the in-car and you
Yeah, I mean,
go stand in a turn 11 or something, and you can't see anything in the car. You don't even know who won the race unless you're watching it on your phone. So
yeah, or you watch the big Diamond Vision. So obviously, your day was kind of like me before data was on every car.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
we were just getting into that, but it was speed traces and all that. But with Yokohama, we use, V-Box Race Logic stuff, and it's nuts.
really, I've never even
Huge money. Unbelievable, the amount of data.
that they're pulling off
oh
the
my
tires.
God.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And it's fun. I love it, and the engineers do all that. I'm not a software guy, but, just from watching the races, you see what they do in real time, Formula One and IndyCar, and utterly data driven now.
Yeah.
Utterly. I think in Drive to Survive, they use that term. One of the team principals said, we are now, they're using AI algorithms to sort the data. They have so many tens of trillions of bytes of data, and to make sense of it, they're doing AI. It's a different world.
Even that's changed. I mean, just a couple of years ago, because what I did for Honda, I was the buyer for all of Acura.
HPD or
HPD.
Okay, yeah. Everyone's looking for something, aren't they? So
always, right? There's no money.
yeah.
Only thing, what is it they say? You want to make $1 million in racing, start with 5. Yeah, so true.
There's so many. Oh my God, you want to do your next documentary. Buddies of mine that I'm still friends with from racing, and we talk about this. You know how many frickin' guys I knew who spent all their money. I mean, really, really, really rich people who ended up broke because of racing. It's not like the fingers of your hand. I'm talking to guys who spent it all. And, like the one I remember my dad would say, how to make a small fortune in racing. You start with a large one and you know when to stop,
Yeah.
And these are guys that didn't
know when to stop.
I mean, there are big names that I could name that I probably shouldn't.
Wouldn't.
stunning falls from grace. I mean, guys that had in today's dollars, like into the hundreds of millions, that ended up like living with friends. And racing is an addiction. It is. Yeah. And the first taste was free for your mechanics. Sounds fantastic. How are you going to stop doing that? You know, and my dad, if he hadn't, you know, sadly died young when he did, he was semi-retired, and his passion was what you're talking about, the kids and the mentoring and the coming up, SAE for sure.
Yeah.
That was his future. You know, he was going to, on a part-time level, you know, dedicate himself to that, which would have been so fun. You know,
well,
would have
been super valuable, I think, to the industry.
But that was absolutely, I think I wrote that on the back of his books about the, you know, that was his real gift with the books and the mentoring, and certainly had a lot of years left in him doing that. Like the guys you're talking about too, you know, Bob and Jacques. And so, yeah, legacy. Yeah, we miss him. He's well remembered, and the books, you know, still sell. We sell about 4,000 copies a year, mostly on Amazon, because it's easier for me. I'm not the guy at this point in my life to go address individual books and take payments, and it's just too much work. But Amazon, I ship whole cartons, and they sell well, you know. And I mean, those Prepare to Win was written as a series of articles for Sports Car Illustrated starting in 1969. I was born in 66.
Okay.
So the books are almost as old as me. And as you know, cars have changed a little bit.
Well, yeah, you think.
But his writing style and the nuts and bolts and the physics of it still apply. You know, it's amazing. I occasionally go through when we reprint and have to go see the proofs, and I'm like, I'll be damned, you know, 50 some years later, and some of the later books are now, you know, 30, 40 years old. It's still relevant in its own way. You know, the engineering, the laws of physics are the same, and a lot of stuff's missing with data and shocks and some of the aero, and obviously it's moved on. But for a guy that buys a Formula Ford or a Bug-Eye Sprite and doesn't know what to do, there's still the viable.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, really, the foundational values are there.
Yeah.
You know, how to torque something, how to not torque something.
Safety wiring, just basic vehicle dynamics, you know, the driving.
Alignments.
Alignment.
I could never, God. Yeah. Thank God Bob took over teaching alignment. I just would get lost completely.
Bob was really into that stuff, the suspension geometry and stuff. He's a real student of all racing. He wasn't a typical driver like he's used to be, I'm sure now more so, a very technical guy.
Do you have any of your dad's stuff around that I could go through with you a little bit, or take a picture or something here and there?
Whatever you want. I do have a little case, you know. I have something I don't know what the F to do with, but I feel like it could be really valuable.
Is it the watch? It's not the watch, is it?
I have two watches that are like gold, and I don't know what to do with those either.
Yeah.
But I'd probably sell them at one point. One was Ken Miles' trophy watch.
Yeah, you told me. Actually, I'm going to make you put that back on.
Yeah,
because we're going to do more.
Yeah.
You told me that you had just before the
I do.
movie.
Yeah, I have in a safe deposit box, you know, Ken Miles' trophy watch from the 66 Daytona 500, his Rolex. And my dad bought it from him. And just really hard to prove the provenance of that watch.
Sure.
And I've tried through Rolex. They don't do release serial number stuff. So they're really funny about that.
They won't release?
Yeah, they won't. A really good friend of mine that I raced with for years, very wealthy guy, I ski with him a lot. He's still all about his racing. Dave McMillan preps all his stuff now. And Dave's 80.
Yeah.
And they go to all the vintage races, and you know, a huge shop.
Is that the guy in Texas you were telling me about that would be good for this kind of thing? Yeah, I still got a bug.
Yeah, I asked Stuart. He said, I'll see Stuart next month. He's a place in Bell. We're going to go skiing. But anyway, Stuart's still all about his racing. Lives and breathes it every day. He has 35 cars in his shop. 2 semis, the engine shop. You know, he's really into it. And I'm like, nah, I don't even like looking back. And he lectured me over way too much alcohol, like all night about and I was like, okay, so I put a little trophy case and a couple pictures up, you know, got like the Dan Gurney and an IndyCar, you know, rookie test and some stuff. And he kind of opened my heart a little bit about it wasn't all bad just because it didn't get, the journey was amazing.
Okay.
And the people and the memories, and some bad, some good. So I did a little trophy case and a couple pictures just in my office here. And then, but I did one for my dad too, so I've got a little case. Got my mom had got some stuff, but she wasn't into racing.
Smart woman.
Yeah. Oh, very. Yeah, there's some.
Oh, the hat.
There's some. Yeah. We got a few of his
I
hats
just got
left.
a chill.
Yeah. Right. Got these are just very random, but this was a guy named Terry Knight who'd been part of Grand Funk Railroad.
Yeah.
And he lived next door to Paul Newman. And my dad ran him in Formula Atlantic for a while, and he had this director's chair made for my dad. It was really funny, Smith. And so that's kind of fun. He was part of Norman's Key Yacht Club in Bahama. It's the largest cocaine ring in the world. So my dad got a call at one point in the middle of the night, and Terry said, "You got to get everything that says Norman's Key off the car and the trailer." And my dad was spray painting this fifth wheel trailer with Krylon paint and masking tape, trying to cover up Norman's Key because they got busted, right? And Terry was a very colorful guy, but kind of a fun deal. And then got old racing licenses from my dad in the 60s. Wow. And some racing trophies from him in Formula Junior in Italy. He raced back in the day, and Formula SAE award, and some of his old drafting instruments that he used for the basics. And yeah, just fun stuff. But the hats, of course, are
that's
paramount.
It just gave me a chill.
Yeah,
it's so funny.
Yeah, he was known for that. My dad kept a diary in 1961, like a full calendar year there. He and my mom were living in Italy, and he was trying to be a driver. And it's mesmerizing stuff. My dad, as you know, is a good writer.
Yeah.
Just beautiful. And I do want to do a book out of it. It's on my mind, and a lot of great photos from that day. A lot of big names. He was racing with John Surtees and Jim Clark, and Colin Chapman was in there a lot, and they'd be having these drunken dinners with these guys, all just in his handwritten diary, and there was guys they lost. It was so dangerous back then. So he's talking about guys that died, and he didn't know if he wanted to do this anymore. And then, really poignant stuff. And it might be vanity press. I don't think it would sell real big. But I do want to do it. It's kind of on my...
I hope you do.
Yeah.
Because I think that's that first person, what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
First person history.
It is. And literally from the mouth. So...
Wow.
Anyway...
And these?
Yeah, that's my dad and my mom. This is Formula Junior in Italy and Europe in the 60, 61, maybe 62. And they was there for a couple years trying, and had some, moderate success. He just was winging a prayer. They lived in a Volkswagen camper van and towed the car, and he prepped the car, and his diary is a trail of tears, just doing it with no money and no background in American Europe. It was like a lamb to the slaughter, racing against Colin Chapman's factory Lotuses with Jim Clark, and you know how that's going to go. It's still to this day, it's...
But, you like just can't do that anymore.
Do you know what? So, my friend Alan Berg, his son Alexander is a driver now. He's 17, and he's doing well, and he came up through karting, and I went to a SCUSA go-kart race at Cal Speedway about 3-4 years ago. There were probably 500 kids and grown-ups. I have a seniors class racing. It was amazing. So neat, the karts now and the technology. I just loved it. There was not one dad and a kid in a pickup truck, not one frickin' dad and a kid. They were all out of semis, a couple of them out of fifth wheels, 4 or 5 drivers, driver coaches, trackside engineers, these 8-year-old kids looking at data on a screen in the semi-trailer, spare carts, rows of engines, simulators, they're doing it, and I'm like, and they're spending way 6 figures. They're going to New Orleans one week and up to Montreal the next week, and then down with a semi.
Yeah.
It's crazy. They're spending more than a Formula Atlantic budget was back in the day.
Yeah.
And it's not accessible. It never really was, right? But there were some...
Well, there were guys like that
who
could...
Yeah, there were dads in pickup trucks, and I was one of them. And anymore, man, I couldn't believe in it, even at the karting level. You think there'd be some dad that was an engineer and just got a little trailer and didn't have $250,000 to spend, and there wasn't any of that. This was all big teams, big checks going out. And it kind of made me sad, you know. And the kids are so good now. They're so trained in the simulator and the fitness. I mean, it's at a very high level.
Yeah, it's funny because we used to do trackside event at Vegas for SCUSA.
Oh yeah. Oh, that run
And that's
up was
the first
huge.
time I would see
Helicopters, semis.
TV.
Michael Schumacher raced
Yes,
one here, so yeah.
And we're standing there, and I'm looking around going,
my
my God, there's European haulers here. Not just one, like Praga, the kart manufacturer. Right. Had 4 haulers there.
Oh, it's amazing. I love it.
For karting?
But who can afford it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because we built, in 2004, we built a kart track at Sears Point.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Up on the hill.
I
So
think
we
I
built
saw
the
it,
Sears Point International Karting Center. And it was all the FIA spec and everything else, but you could still get the dad with the pickup truck coming out.
Yeah. And there probably, I was at a SCUSA race. I'm sure when you go to Adams kart track or some of the local, I assume that there's some dads and because it's just a really cool thing to do with your kid anyway. Right. And yeah, this was a big race, so I'm sure at a grassroots level there's still some of that. But it made me sad. And I don't know what would stop it. You know, if you had a smart dad that was maybe an engineer, an aerospace or a racing guy, you could still do it.
And the kid. The kid's got to be the right kid too.
Right. Yeah. But the racing was great. Oh man, it was fun. I enjoyed it. Talking about old people and old times, when I was karting in the 80s, 82, 3, 84, all the engine builders and the guys and the distributors, they were all still there. They were like 80 years old prepping karts. Like, old racers never die, right?
Oh, no.
Crazy.
The chemicals keep us alive.
Oh my God. You know, I don't know you from the karting, you know Mike Manning at all?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mike was there and I'm like, oh my God, I hadn't seen the guy for 30 years and we were laughing and he's like, come on out, drive a kart. You know, he's at Willow Springs. He's got a shop on the kart track there.
Okay.
And he was awesome, and I just couldn't believe he was still doing it. He's still putting an engine on a kid's kart.
But
and
they do it. I mean, the Sweet Tech was one of our biggest customers from Honda. That's one of the things we did. We did the Honda kits and the kid kits and the CR125 kit for the longest time. And so Mike Manning was a customer. And Sweet Tech was a huge customer. Jason was one of our regular guys.
Right. It's fun. I love it. I love seeing the karts run, and it's so cutthroat competitive, and you know, a lot of these kids are going places, and they're just so neat. The technology, I mean, they're still tube-frame go-karts, but they're so cool now. Yeah.
That's crazy.
But I'm super happy that you're doing this. And is it going to be like the Willie T. Ribbs movie, kind of a niche? You're just getting the raw material now.
What I'm doing now is what I was told to do by my film mentor.
Yeah.
And he said, go get the old guys. Now, we're not old guys, right? We're the
same
age, although you look a lot better. But what my job was to do was to gather the stories.
Yeah. Get
the information out, get the stories, get peeks at these kind of things.
The raw material.
That kind of stuff. You know,
it's golden. I'm thrilled to see it come into some kind of format.
I mean, to me, it's important. You know, at first I thought, well, I'll just focus on the Russell School because that's all I really know. Yeah. And Jacques said, no, this is much bigger. You've got to think about the other schools and how guys got in without it, and all of the bigger picture. And then he wanted me to dig up some old Jim Russell stories, and he said, oh, yeah, you got to find out about the guys who were running the tower when Jim would drink too much and fly his plane home. You got to find those guys. I go, Jacques, they're probably dead.
Do you know what's weird? When I was a kid, and my dad, would go up and test with teams at Sears Point all the time, and that was Bob Bondurant territory, right? And my dad knew Bob. Bob was so colorful. Yeah. And I did ride and drives, and he'd come in for Ford later, and we'd do hot laps together. Bob was a great guy to go have dinner with. He was fun as hell. I'm telling you, I loved that guy. He'd led a big life, and I really enjoyed, what an icon. But I will tell you, in the day when that was going and blowing, Bondurant, there was some money there. He had a Bell Jet Ranger helicopter.
Yes.
Remember that?
Oh yeah.
I don't think guys running racing schools now are getting helicopters. He was, and Jacques too, I'm sure in the day, whoever, it was very lucrative.
Oh,
And
yeah.
maybe now the overhead's too high.
I think it's a combination.
I don't know.
But
Putting a bunch
somebody-
of wealthy people in cars that go 150 miles an
Yeah, and
hour.
hoping that,
what can possibly go wrong?
Yeah, 30 lawyers and race cars.
Oh,
Ready to
yeah.
go.
This is a great
What-
idea.
that was
Yeah.
it. And it's so funny because, I get contacted. I mean, after Russell blew up, I immediately got contacted by Thunder Hill and said, come up here and make
okay.
a school.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm going to check my pockets. I got a simple life, but I can do this and at least get together,
Golden.
some of the stories and some of the memories.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where it's going, to be honest with you. How you start out with a project.
If you do a good job, it'll find an audience, and
Well-
even if it's just on YouTube or a website or
And that's
I
what
don't know. I don't know. I mean, like the Willie T movie. I mean, I feel like you're focusing, rightfully so, on the school and the repercussions and that being the epicenter of all of it. But I think back, and there's so many guys that I knew and worked with, like Dave McMillan, and he was a driver too. He was a very good driver in the day. It'd just be too big of a documentary if you spread out to make it. Where would you go? I mean, you'd have 10 million
10
feet
million
of
stories.
yeah.
And that's
David would be a good one though. Like I mentioned, he's a good guy. He's a bit of a curmudgeon,
good.
typical Kiwi, and he's just been everywhere and done everything. He was a mechanic at the Formula 2 race where Jim Clark was killed. That's how long the guy's been doing it,
And he's still working?
and he's still prepping cars for my friend Stuart Crow in Dallas and driving the semi and loading it and dynoing shock, whatever they do. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think he's 80, maybe 81,
He's
and
down.
he lives. Last I knew, he lived in a kind of Airstream type trailer behind the shop. And Stuart would tell me that when he was done working, he'd go to his trailer and go online and look up racing stuff. Just the guy has lived and breathed it for 65 years. Wow. I don't think there's anyone more prolific. I mean, you look at a Bernie Ecclestone or something who's been at the top level.
Yeah.
He's like 93, but. As far as just doing the work and the day-to-day, I don't think there's anyone that compares to him. Still turning wrenches at 80, 81, something like that.
See, and I think that's the hardest part for this film concept is to try and capture how it gets under your skin, what it is to you. I mean, driver, like you say, you don't want to look back. I have trouble looking back, too.
I love the whole
track.
stretch of coast from here being kind of the southern edge
Yep.
to where the bike path ends in Malibu, and we love Malibu.
Yeah.
I love this little stretch of coast like nowhere else in the world. I literally just love the casual lifestyle, the energy, the money. It's an affluent with a lot of opportunity, and we all fly over it all the time, right? And I just stare out the window and think how much I love this little strip of coast. It's like 20 miles probably from here to Malibu, something like that. It never gets old.
No.
For me, I really love it.
And
a lot of other cool places in the world too, obviously.
It's weird because, we lived in the jungle. So when you take off at LAX, if you look down to the right, you'd see if I left the porch light on.
Yeah, I was born on Fowling Street. I was born at St. John's, but in Playa.
You were born on Upper Fowling?
Yeah.
You were a hill people.
Yeah,
See, we were down on flat. We lived on Fowling at the flats.
My dad, when he got the job at Shelby, he was a young man. He was like 32. And Shelby is the only place my dad ever worked for 2 years in his life. He was transient. He'd do 3 months, 6 months, 2 races, 4 months, a year. And so they rented a house in Playa. It was a very small house. I've gone to see it and it's been torn down. There's a McMansion, all that's so valuable there. But yeah, I was born at St. John's, brought back to the house on Fowling Street. And because, the Shelby shop was in Venice. So it was just adjacent. It was such a cool... Ken Miles lived in, I think, Hollywood. All those guys were local, just amazing energy. But so then the bonus money for winning Le Mans, my dad took his bonus and it was a down payment on a small house in Palos Verdes that my sister and I still own as a rental.
Oh, cool.
House we grew up in.
That's great.
So yeah, that was in '67. They moved from Playa to, I don't have any memories. I was a year old. Playa. But I've gone to see it, and I do love that little, like you say, the jungle there next to the...
That's where we lived. We lived on Fowling.
Used to go to did you?
Yeah,
No
we lived
way.
at 121 Fowling, the downstairs of an upstairs downstairs.
Before you leave, I'm gonna find some photo albums and see what address it was.
Okay.
That'd be crazy if it was like
Right up on the hill. I'm sure
couldn't
you're in
have
the
been.
200s.
Yeah, it was before you start down the
Yeah,
hill.
before you start down the
You
slope.
come around the corner at the top,
Yep.
and you start down to the left,
Mm-hmm.
and it was on the right, maybe 2-3 houses on
That's so funny.
the right.
Yes.
And I would have loved to have seen the actual house.
Yeah.
But you know,
Yeah, it's all McMansioned up
it was,
there now.
yeah.
And the jungle is still.
You ever go to Pinguini? You
Oh,
know,
yeah. That's the first night we moved in. After we moved out of Walnut Creek, we moved to this crappy apartment we had in Newhall.
Yeah.
While I was working at Honda, trying to
Okay.
find where we were going to live.
Yeah.
And we looked around. We stopped in Culver City. We saw a house. The guy's mom had just passed, or grandma, or something. It was a really nice little house. I said, "Well, I got one more to go look at."
Yeah.
And that guy's like, "Okay, where are you going to go look?" He goes, "This is getting a lot of interest." And I said, "Well, it's down here at the end of Culver." And he goes, "The jungle?" He goes, "Oh
haven't
hell,
heard
I'm
it called
going with
that.
you." And he goes, "You got to move to the jungle."
That's cool,
and I had
yeah.
gone on Google Earth and I was walking around trying to figure. I'm like, "There's driveways, but the streets are walkways. I don't get it."
That's pretty wild.
4.5 years on Fowling Street, and then my wife got a job over in the valley, so we moved. Which you can imagine, just
Because that's a fun area.
Well,
That's
I mean,
and you got
nice
the
place.
marsh, all the marshes. And
Yes.
it's just a really neat.
you get off 405 and you get on 90, and your shoulders drop a little, right? Because
Yeah.
from there to HPD is a bit of a haul
Yeah, that is.
to Santa Clarita, right?
Yeah,
and
unless
then
you can work from home 3 days a week or something.
well, I couldn't do it. They wouldn't let me.
Yeah.
So I started to relax more and more, and then you get home and you park and you walk across the street,
Oh yeah,
and there's the ocean.
it's golden. I love it. Yeah, I did that. I went one day, like a few years ago. I just because I wasn't familiar with where I was, raised this year or two, and I parked and I just walked for like an hour, just checking it all out. And it's so Stefan Johansson is a very good friend of a very good friend, and kind of friend of mine, and just a god. It's amazing, amazing story and guy, and he lives in Playa.
On my list.
Oh yeah.
I
oh.
called him and I said, "Here's what I'm doing." And he says, "What do you want from me?" And I said, "Can you say something nice about a mechanic?" And he goes, "Absolutely."
Come on, he'd be
And then
awesome.
coronavirus came.
Oh no, you need to get with Stefan.
But I
He's
will
in
get-
Europe at the moment because I just talked to a friend, but he'd be golden, and he's such a such a charisma. He's a guy.
Well, his artwork too. I follow
Have you
him
seen
on-
the YouTube documentary on him where he talks about his art? And we should go up and I'll find it for you because you need to see this. It's one of the most and I've known him forever. Used to have dinner with him at Pinguini. He'd ride his bicycle over from and he's a god there. It's Pinguini, and he's Stefan Johansson, Ferrari. There's pictures of him everywhere, and
on the walls in Pinguini.
there are pictures of Stefan on the walls
Yeah,
for
first
sure.
of
He
where to
lives 2
go.
blocks away.
Yeah.
And he's friends with the owners, and
Damn.
they'll just pop it on for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
The Stefan Johansson. Someone did lengthy interviews with him about racing and his art and and it's mesmerizing. I mean, the guy is so charismatic. He's very understated, typical kind of Nordic,
He seems so pleasant and quiet on the phone when some weirdo calls him out of the blue. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he was like, "No, I will do that, but I have to go on a plane." I was like, "Oh, when?" I'm like 15 minutes.
Keep
"Oh."
her after him,
Yeah.
and make it happen because he'd be, anything he says is like, but you gotta, when you, have time tonight or next week or whatever, you gotta watch this interview. My friend Brock sent it to me, or sent me the link, and I know he never talks about racing. I probably had a dozen dinners with him, and he has, or less, but I've never heard him, maybe a little bit. He'll talk about the drivers he manages or something, Rosenquist and for a guy that's done everything, won Le Mans overall, he doesn't talk about that, which is so amazing.
Yeah. Like you, it's the past.
Yeah, it's the past, and everyone knows who he is and what he did, so he doesn't need to.
Yeah. And I run into that a lot, especially with the drivers of some, like Bob. Bob's especially. Like,
Yeah.
Look, I don't know. I drove around in circles. People went, "Yay."
Yeah.
But you get him going a little bit, and he starts to remember stuff.
You need to bring beer and wine to your interviews. They'd be way more interesting.
Well, Bob doesn't drink, but
No, doesn't he?
no. I mean, he'll have a glass of wine a little bit, but he's a teetotaler. Probably why he's in better shape than me.
Yeah, he was always very fit. Well, you know what? And it's kind of on the line of what you're doing, the recollections and whatever. Professionally, I think you'd really benefit from watching. I think there's a series of 2 or 3 interviews with him. I don't know who the guy is that did it or what the point was, other than it's just
It's probably just
cool.
as silly as me, capturing history, right?
Yeah. Might be this one. Yeah, there's 3 or 4, but I think this is the one. And even my daughter, who's 15, watched it and she was like, wow, she's met him. She has like an art studio in Santa Monica. Oh my God. You're in for a treat. You got to watch the whole thing. It's like an hour.
I'll watch it tonight.
Frickin' great. Golden.
3 laps, you're kind of in the space you want to be. Whereas with the painting, it's still to grind sometimes.
Such a talented guy.
I'm a former racing driver from Sweden. I spent, all my life really racing cars and huge interest in art. Firstly as a collector, and then I decided to start painting on my own, which is sort of tied into my previous life in racing also, the way it started. But and now it's really my passion, just like racing was for my previous
Isn't that cool as
That's
shit?
amazing. Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, I did 10 years in F1. I drove for a number of different teams, but primarily Ferrari, a couple of years McLaren. Finished 5th in the World Championship in '86. Yeah, I had a pretty good run, 10-year run in F1, and then somewhat mixed
Pretty
results,
good run.
but that's kind of the nature of F1, the big...
You know what's sad for him? Is such a talented guy. Is he never won a race, and he could have. Just timing. Like look, there's guys in F1.
Oh, yeah.
Did you watch the race yesterday?
No.
Okay.
No, I was driving.
Okay.
Spent the whole damn day on it.
Well, it was good. So Carlos Sainz got his appendix out.
Yeah.
So in FP3 they brought in Ali Behrman, who just turned 18.
Yeah, Holly.
He finished 7th.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He passed Lando Norris and Hamilton and finished 7th. He had
that's
40 minutes of running before the race.
Oh my God.
It's the most stunning F1 debut I have ever seen, and the guy just turned 18.
Oh boy.
The seat didn't even fit him right. He kept complaining about the pads and stuff.
Oh yeah, of course I.
And they're averaging like 150 some. That's a hairy job.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the G-forces alone.
That is a future world champion, that guy.
Absolutely.
Really interesting.
But okay, I'll definitely watch
Yeah,
this. This is great.
check it
Thank
out.
you.
Art and racing.
Yeah.
Such a beautifully done.
Yeah. Well, somebody's a hell of a lot more professional at this than me. Look, it's about the people that aren't a household name.
Yeah. Who make it all happen. There's an interview with Kurt Busch, who's retired now, right? Not a big NASCAR guy.
Yeah.
It's like last year. That's when he won Le Mans overall. And anyway, he said that. It was almost condescending the way he said it. Whatever he was making, say 10, 12 million a year back then. He said, you really need to look at the guys that load the car and drive back to the shop. And he's like, these guys make less in a year than I make in a day.
Right.
Way less. Think about that. If you break down 12 million a year, and he doesn't even work 365 days, whatever, he's making, I don't know, like 100 grand a day or something. And these guys work all year for half of his day rate.
Yeah, it's
and no one knows their name or their passion or their drive, and they keep probably longer hours than him. Sacrifices and the family and the moving around and the
travel.
Oh my gosh.
And the instability. It's not like there's always going to be racing at that shop tomorrow.
When I was younger, even before I raced, the SCCA scene was so big, all the prep shops and the full fields and just very competitive. And it's more of a grassroots thing now, but there were so many of those, like you talked about Cameron McGee, so many, and Bill Fickling, and so many guys that ran a bunch of cars in multiple series and made a good living out of it and employed all these people. And a buddy of mine did some SCCA. I went to an SCCA, like a national at Cal Speedway some years ago, and it wasn't much. It's lost it. Someone let all the air out of that thing.
What?
It was not. I don't know where all the energy went. Into vintage, I'm told, is pretty big. A lot of the
Vintage
guys
is
that,
big.
and then of course all the road to Indy and the Honda stuff you're talking about, Formula 4 and karting.
I was down here that first year. The head of the shop said, "Hey, we're doing this Formula Ford thing. We've got one car. I'm trying to do something with Cal Speed to build up the Pacific F1600 series.
Yeah.
Pacific series was started with Bobby
And they had the F2000 one
and the
too.
F2000.
A buddy of
right?
mine, a local lawyer, raced in that, and I used to go to some of the
and
races. A
and,
few good kids came up through that. Charlie Kimball, and there was some good shoes.
Colton Herta.
Did he do some in there too?
Yeah, he was the 1600 guy.
Yeah, okay.
And then he went to the 2000. And Pat Award.
Did he do some of that too? I didn't know that.
They used to
Wow.
race each other. So I volunteered when I was down here. After hours, we'd prep the Piper chassis we had.
Yeah.
And we'd get 3 guys. So we had a first, second, and a third.
Yeah.
And the marketing manager for Acura was our driver. So by the time I stopped putting in extra time doing that, we had 18 cars.
Wow,
Just
okay.
in Formula Ford.
Is that still going, or?
I don't know.
I don't think it is.
Les, who was the president.
Les Richter, or Les
Phillips.
Phillips.
At Buttonwillow. He was kind of running the series.
Yeah,
then
and he
Bobby,
raced in it too.
Yeah, he did. He's still pretty fast
For
what
an
I
older
understand.
guy, he's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Bobby and Les and I decided to put some energy back into it, and we brought it up to 18 cars. And
Oh, that's great.
eventually, it just kind of petered out. I had to get back to life.
Yeah.
But we had a good time, and I
But
think
there were guys that ran cars in SCCA stuff without really going up to the pro levels of Super V and Atlantic and Indy Lights and all that, and just made a good living. Guys that were Tiga importers or Swift and supplied the parts and ran 4, 5, 6 cars and had a prep shop and an engine shop, and it was a real cottage industry.
Yeah.
And obviously it's still going, but I don't think it's like it was for whatever reason. Maybe too expensive now.
I think it's expensive. I really do.
It's a lot of money to do this stuff.
When we used to do the Techniques of Racing course was $18.95 at first, and it was $21.95 when we were done. Okay, so that was 3 days.
Yeah.
And then the advanced racing, so that was in the Mazdas, and qualified you for your first lapping and racing session with us, which qualified you for regional SCCA.
Yeah.
That was $3,095.
And even if you adjust for inflation, it's way more than that.
It's
way
the price
more
of
than
fuel,
that.
the price of tires, the price of
The guys working on the
travel,
car, the insurance, the track
insurance,
rent,
the track time.
the equipment itself.
It just became so huge. And so to hear the current rates, it's a little shocking to me.
It is.
I get it, and I'm impressed that Alan's hanging on. But
Yeah.
I see, we actually went out and talked to him at Cal Club, me and Mark Sowers,
Okay, cool.
about powering it with Hondas, his Renault, or his
Man,
Renault chassis.
that would have been great. He was always looking for. I got him meetings with Yokohama.
Yeah.
Same thing. That was Bondurant's gift, and I'm sure Jacques too, is that he had Ford and Goodyear and a fuel sponsor.
Yeah.
And he told me when we did ride and drives together years later, over wine at dinner, he's like, "Oh, I never could have made it work without Goodyear, Ford, and whoever that was like, I don't know, it was like Mobil or Shell or someone." It's like basically he got free cars, tires, and fuel. That's probably $1 million a year or something. That was probably his whole profit was what he was getting. And great PR for them.
We had all of these trade agreements, Earls.
Yeah.
Bill and Bob came up and they looked around. Well, Mitsubishi's kind of cool.
I remember them doing the school.
Yeah.
And his son Bill, I remember, I grew up, went to college with him at Long Beach. Great guy.
Is he still an oceanography teacher?
He is. Yeah. He's a high school biology teacher I haven't seen him in a number of years, but very close growing up. And then he teaches shark stuff at a junior college, I believe, in Vegas. And Bob and Maureen live there. And anyway, but I remember them going through that school, and Bob really took to it and enjoyed it. He ended up buying the charity ride for the Long Beach Celebrity Race one year, continuing with what he learned with you guys. And Bill, who was awesome, said when they got up to the higher rev limits and the faster, he was like, I was kind of out.
Yeah.
He was like, he didn't love it the way that, and some people don't,
No,
I mean,
it's scary.
And if it just doesn't do it for you, awesome family, and they sold the company, obviously.
Yeah, he sold out to Holly.
To Holly.
I saw that.
But yeah, what a fascinating
It's a
look
small
back
world.
at all this
It's a
stuff.
small world too, right?
Very, very small. I enjoyed it. Growing up, even before I was racing, I was just immersed in it. We'd have mechanics staying in the spare bedroom and going out to dinner with other teams, and it was just 80% of our social life just revolved around kind of grassroots
Yeah.
racing. Because my dad, after Shelby, didn't really do higher level stuff. He never had IndyCar involvement or factory stuff. It was mostly, you know, feeder series and some sports car stuff as a consultant. You know,
Yeah.
he never really had Carroll Smith Racing. He was a consultant. He'd bring his alignment gear